My name is Thomas Whitfield. I am 66 years old, and I built my son's entire future with my bare hands. Not metaphorically, literally. I poured concrete, rewired electrical panels, and crawled under houses in the dead of winter for 30 years so my son could attend a university I never set foot in. So when my son's fiancée looked me dead in the eyes at his company launch party and said, "Could you please go wait by the bar? You are making our investors uncomfortable," I set my glass of water down very slowly on the white tablecloth, looked her straight back and asked, "Do you have any idea who just walked through that door?" Her smile did not waver at first, but within 3 seconds, it completely disappeared. Before I tell you the rest of this story, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city and state in the comments below, because I want to know how many of you have ever been made to feel invisible by the very people you spent your whole life building up. Hit the like button if you have. And if you are new here, subscribe, because this story is only just getting started. My son's name is Kevin. He is 34 years old, and from the time he was 7, he was the kind of child who made teachers stop mid-lesson to compliment his focus. His mother passed away from a stroke when he was 11, and from that day forward, it was just the two of us in our small brick house on Carlisle Street in Dayton, Ohio. I worked maintenance and light construction during the day, and picked up weekend jobs patching roofs and replacing water heaters at night. Kevin never went without a school supply, never missed a field trip, never wore a coat with a broken zipper. He went to Ohio State on a partial scholarship, and I paid the rest in cash, $12,000 a year, every fall, without blinking. He graduated with a degree in business administration, landed a job at a logistics firm, and within 4 years had built enough of a client network to talk seriously about starting his own company. I listened to every pitch, every revised business plan, every late-night phone call where he walked me through projected revenue models I barely understood. And every single time, I told him the same thing. "You can do this. I believe in you. Go." What Kevin did not know, what I had never told a single living soul outside of my attorney, was that I was not just a retired handyman scraping by on a modest pension. 22 years ago, I had taken out a second mortgage on the Carlisle Street house, pooled it with every dollar I had saved, and quietly invested in a small regional medical supply distribution company called Hargrove Medical, through a private investment vehicle my attorney set up under the name Whitfield Asset Trust. It was a gamble. It was the kind of thing a man with no financial education and a strong gut instinct does when he is desperate to leave something real behind for his child. The company grew. Then it grew again. It went regional, then national, then public. By the time Kevin was graduating college, the trust was worth just under $40 million. By the time Kevin was pitching investors for his logistics startup, it had crossed $90 million. I kept driving my 2008 Silverado. I kept wearing Carhartt jackets and work boots. I kept living in the same brick house on Carlisle Street because I had watched what inherited comfort did to the children of the wealthy men I used to work for. I had watched their kids grow up soft, entitled, and utterly incapable of tolerating discomfort. I refused to do that to my son. I wanted Kevin to earn something. I wanted him to know what it felt like to build a thing himself, from nothing, so that no one could ever take that feeling away from him. That was the plan. And for a long time, I believed it was working. Then Kevin met Vanessa. Her last name was Cromwell, and her family owned 3 car dealerships in Columbus and a vacation property on Lake Erie. She was sharp, well-dressed, and relentlessly focused on appearances. She was not a bad person, not at first. But over the 18 months Kevin dated her before the engagement, I noticed small things. She would suggest Kevin replace his reliable Toyota with something more impressive for client meetings. She steered him away from the Carlisle Street neighborhood during family introductions, referring to it once as a place Kevin was from rather than a place we lived. She never asked about his mother. Not once. And whenever I joined Kevin and Vanessa for dinner, she would look at my clothing, then at Kevin, and then say something entirely unrelated in a tone that communicated everything she had decided not to say out loud. Kevin started to change in ways that were hard to name. He stopped calling me when he had a business problem and started calling Vanessa's father instead. He stopped driving out to Dayton for Sunday dinner and started sending gift cards on my birthday. He started referring to the Carlisle Street house as Dad's place the way you refer to something you have moved past. He was not cruel about it. He was just increasingly elsewhere. And I told myself it was normal. I told myself I was watching my son become an adult, stretch into his own life, find his own people. I told myself the distance was healthy. The night before the launch party, Kevin called me. He sounded tense. "Dad, I just want to be upfront with you about tomorrow night. This is a very important event. We have 3 serious investors coming, and Vanessa's family will be there, and I need everything to go smoothly." He paused. "I know how you dress, and I am not trying to be disrespectful, but maybe wear something a little more formal. Dark pants, a button down at least." I told him I would wear a jacket. He said, "Good. And Dad, please do not start talking to people about the house repairs you used to do. These are corporate people. Just let me do the talking with the investors, okay? I do not want any misunderstandings." I held the phone and let a few seconds pass. "I will be there, son," I said. "You do not have to worry about me." I was quiet after I hung up. I sat at the kitchen table where Kevin had done his homework for 12 years, and I looked at the worn grain of the wood, and I felt something shift inside my chest. Not anger, something quieter and more final than anger. I went to the closet in the back bedroom, moved aside the winter coats, and opened the small fireproof lockbox on the upper shelf. Inside was a single manila folder. Inside the folder was a 1-page summary of the Whitfield Asset Trust, prepared by my attorney Gerald Marsh, who had been managing my financial affairs since 2003. I read it once, slowly, then placed it back in the folder back in the box, and the box behind the coats. I drove to Columbus the next evening in my Silverado. I wore dark slacks, a white dress shirt, and a charcoal blazer I had purchased 3 years ago for a cousin's funeral. I looked exactly like what Kevin expected me to look like. A retired working man making a respectable effort. The event was held at a venue called Meridian Hall, a converted warehouse space in the short North District that had been dressed up with Edison bulbs and long white tables. Kevin's company was called Vantage Freight Solutions, and the room was decorated with the company logo on every surface. There were roughly 80 people in attendance. The 3 lead investors Kevin had mentioned were easy to spot. They moved through the room with the quiet assurance of men who were accustomed to being the most important people present. Vanessa's father, a broad-shouldered man named Don Cromwell, stood near the bar in a suit that cost more than my monthly utilities, talking loudly about a deal he had just closed on a dealership in Westerville. I found Kevin near the entrance. He shook my hand, which was the first thing that told me how the night was going to go. I could not remember the last time my son had shaken my hand instead of hugging me. He introduced me to 2 people standing nearby as my father, Tom, he's retired, and then was immediately pulled away by someone with a clipboard. I stood with a glass of water near the edge of the room and watched my son work. He was good at it, confident, articulate, present. He had learned how to carry himself, and I felt genuine pride watching him move through that crowd. Whatever else was happening, that part was real. Vanessa found me approximately 40 minutes into the evening. She was wearing a navy dress and her hair was pinned up in a way that made her look older and more serious than she usually did. She came to stand beside me, and for a moment we both just looked out at the room. "Thomas," she said. "Not Tom. Thomas." "Vanessa," I replied. "Kevin has worked incredibly hard for tonight. It really means a lot to him that you are here." She paused in a way that made clear the next sentence was the real one. "I want to ask you something, and I hope you will take it the way it is intended. The 3 investors over there, the ones by the window, they are very image-conscious people. They are used to a certain kind of environment. Kevin is trying to position Vantage as a premium tier firm, and first impressions tonight are everything." She turned to look at me directly. "I think it would be better for Kevin if you spent the rest of the evening closer to the bar area, away from the main investor conversations. You can still enjoy the food, and Kevin will come find you when he has a free moment. I just do not want anything to distract from the message he is trying to send." I looked at her for a long moment. "You want me to stand by the bar," I said, "so the investors do not see me?" She gave me a patient smile. "I want Kevin to have the best possible night. That is all." I set my glass down on the nearest table, the same way you set something down when you have made a decision and your hands need to be free. I looked at Vanessa Cromwell and I said quietly, "Do you have any idea who just walked through that door?" She blinked. The smile held for 2 more seconds. Then it did not. I did not explain myself. I turned and walked toward the window where the three investors were standing. Behind me, I heard Vanessa call softly for Kevin. The three investors were discussing freight margins when I approached. Their names, as I had learned from Gerald's research the previous week, were David Park, Susan Holt, and Raymond Ferris. Raymond Ferris was the one I had been most interested in when Gerald first sent me their profiles. He was a senior partner at Clearwater Capital Group, a mid-market private equity firm out of Cincinnati. Clearwater had invested in 2 companies in the medical supply distribution space over the last 5 years. One of those companies was a regional competitor that Hargrove Medical, the company in which my trust held a significant equity stake, had been quietly evaluating for acquisition. Raymond Ferris had, without knowing it, been sitting across a negotiating table from my interests for the better part of 18 months. I introduced myself. I told them my name was Thomas Whitfield. I did not say I was Kevin's father. I did not mention Vantage Freight at all. I asked Raymond a specific question about his firm's thesis on last-mile logistics infrastructure, and I watched his expression shift. The way a person's expression shifts when they realize the man they almost wrote off has just asked a question that only someone deeply inside the industry would know to ask. That is a very specific question, Raymond said. I spent a long time watching that sector from the inside, I replied. He tilted his head slightly. What was your position? Equity holder, I said. Whitfield Asset Trust. You may not know the name. We have been quiet. Raymond Ferris looked at me with the focused attention of a man recalibrating. Whitfield Asset Trust, he repeated slowly. Are you connected to the Hargrove Medical stake? That is one of our positions, I said. The shift in energy was immediate and unmistakable. Susan Holt straightened. David Park turned fully toward me. Raymond extended his hand again, this time the way you extend a hand when you have just understood who you are talking to. I heard footsteps behind me and turned. Kevin was approaching, his face tight with something I could not quite read. Vanessa was a few steps back, her arms crossed. Dad, Kevin said, lowering his voice. What are you doing over here? These are my investors. I need to… Kevin, Raymond Ferris said, extending his hand toward my son with a broad smile. Your father was just telling us about the Hargrove position. We had no idea you had this kind of capital backing behind Vantage. Why didn't your pitch deck lead with this? Kevin stopped. He looked at Raymond. He looked at me. His mouth opened slightly. I'm sorry, Kevin said carefully. What do you mean, the Hargrove position? Raymond looked between the two of us. The Whitfield Asset Trust. Your father's equity stake in Hargrove Medical. If that capital is available to backstop Vantage's early growth, this changes our risk calculus entirely. He paused. You do know about your father's investment trust, don't you? The room around us had not stopped moving, but in our small corner of it, everything went very still. Kevin looked at me. His face had moved past confusion into something raw. Dad, he said quietly, what is he talking about? Maybe we should find a quieter room, I said. Kevin found an unused side office off the main hall. He closed the door behind us. The noise from the event softened to a low hum through the walls. Kevin stood near the door. I sat in one of the folding chairs near the wall. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Tell me what Raymond Ferris was talking about, Kevin said. His voice was controlled, but just barely. So I told him. I told him about the second mortgage on the Carlisle Street house in 2002. I told him about the early investment in Hargrove Medical, about the trust Gerald Marsh had structured, about 22 years of quiet compounding. I told him the current valuation. I watched my son's face as the number settled on him like something physical. He sat down in the chair across from me and pressed both palms flat on his knees and stared at the floor. $90 million, he said. Closer to 93 as of last quarter, I said. He was quiet for a long time. Why didn't you tell me? He finally asked. His voice was not angry yet. It was something younger than anger. Because I watched what money does to people before they have earned anything of their own, I said. Your mother and I talked about this when you were very small. We wanted you to build something real. We were terrified of raising someone who expected the world to hand itself over. Kevin looked up at me. You let me struggle. I watched you work, I said. Those are different things. You let me pitch investors for 8 months without telling me I had a $90 million trust behind me. You let Vanessa, he stopped himself. I waited. Vanessa told you to go stand by the bar, Kevin said. It was not a question. His jaw tightened. She told my father to go stand by the bar. She did, I said. He put his face in his hands. He stayed that way for a long moment. When he looked up, his eyes were red at the edges. Dad, I am so sorry. I told you not to talk to people. I told you on the phone last night. You told me not to embarrass you, I said gently. He flinched. That is not what I meant. I know it is not what you meant, I said. But I want you to think about what you did mean. Not tonight. Not right now. Later, when this is all settled, I want you to sit somewhere quiet and think about what you have been meaning for the last 18 months. Kevin stood up and walked to the small window that looked out onto the parking lot. He stood there with his back to me for a while. What happens now? He asked. Now you go back into that room and you finish your launch party, I said. You shake hands with Raymond Ferris and Susan Holt and David Park, and you tell them about your company the way you have been preparing to tell them for 8 months. You do not need my trust to close this deal. You built Vantage on your own. That is real. Do not let tonight take that away from you. He turned around. And you? I am going to find Gerald Marsh, I said. He drove up from Cincinnati tonight because I asked him to. We have some paperwork to discuss. Kevin looked at me for a long moment. Something in his face was trying to find its way back to something older and more familiar. Paperwork, he repeated. There are some decisions I have been sitting on for a while, I said. Tonight clarified a few things. I left the side office and found Gerald near the entrance, nursing a club soda, and looking precisely as comfortable as a man who has been quietly managing significant wealth for 2 decades tends to look in a room full of people who are still trying to acquire it. Gerald was 61 years old, trim, unhurried, with the kind of steady gaze that made judges and opposing counsel alike take him seriously. He and I shook hands and walked out to the small courtyard behind the venue. The October air was cold and clean. Gerald produced a folder from his inside jacket pocket and handed it to me without ceremony. You ready? He asked. Past ready, I said. The folder contained 2 documents I had asked Gerald to prepare over the previous 10 days. The first was a formal letter of intent to establish a scholarship endowment through the Whitfield Asset Trust, directing $12 million toward a fund that would provide 4-year tuition grants to first-generation college students in the Dayton metropolitan area, with preference given to students from single-parent households. The second document was a restructuring directive that shifted the trust's governance to a 5-member independent board, removing me as the sole decision-maker and ensuring the fund would continue operating according to its stated mission regardless of what happened to me personally. I signed both documents against the brick wall of the courtyard, while Gerald witnessed and dated each signature. One more thing, Gerald said, tucking the signed papers back into the folder. He handed me a single printed page. You asked me to run a profile on Don Cromwell's dealership group. I did. I read the page in the glow of the courtyard light fixture. Don Cromwell's 3 Columbus dealerships had been operating on stretched floor plan financing for the better part of 2 years. One location was currently under a quiet audit by its primary lender. The family's Lake Erie property was mortgaged at 92% of its assessed value. The wealth Vanessa's family projected was real, in the way a movie set is real. It faced the right direction and photographed beautifully, but there was nothing behind it. I handed the page back to Gerald. I did not feel the satisfaction I might have expected. What I felt instead was a dull, sad clarity. Vanessa had been chasing something in Kevin the same way Kevin had been, without knowing it, standing next to something he could not see in me. We were all, in our various ways, misjudging what was actually in the room. I went back inside. The main event had moved into the formal presentation portion. Kevin was at the front of the room with a slide deck behind him, speaking to the assembled guests with a composure that made me straighten my spine just watching him. He was excellent. He knew his numbers, he knew his market, he knew exactly what objections were likely and how to address them before they were raised. Watching him work, I felt the same thing I had felt when he defended his senior thesis, when he signed his first lease for office space, when he called me at 11 at night after landing his first major contract and said nothing for a moment before saying, "Dad, I think this is actually going to work." I felt the specific pride of a parent who has watched a child become someone they genuinely admire. Raymond Ferris caught my eye from across the room and gave me a small, respectful nod. Vanessa found me a second time near the end of the evening. She was quieter now. The precise social confidence from earlier was still present but had been adjusted, the way you adjust a garment when the weather changes unexpectedly. Kevin told me, she said, about the trust. I assumed he would, I said. She was quiet for a moment. I could see her trying to locate the right register for this conversation and not quite finding it. I owe you an apology. What I said earlier was inappropriate and disrespectful, and I am sorry. I looked at her. She was not a dishonest person. The apology was genuine, in the way most apologies are genuine when the power dynamic has shifted and the person apologizing has had time to feel embarrassed. I did not hold it against her, but I also did not rush to absolve her. The apology is accepted, I said. But I want to say one thing to you, and I hope you will hear it in the spirit it is offered. What you did tonight, asking me to stand away from the investors, steering Kevin away from his roots, treating the place he grew up as something to be explained away. That is not a one-night mistake. That is a pattern, and Kevin is going to have to decide, in his own time, what he thinks about that pattern. Not because of tonight, because of all the nights before tonight that led here. She looked at the floor and nodded once. He is a good man, I said. He built something real. Make sure the person standing next to him helps him stay that way. I said goodbye to Kevin near the entrance. He walked me to the door, and when we reached it, he stopped and looked at me the way he used to look at me when he was a kid, and something had shaken him, and he was deciding whether to pretend it hadn't. He decided not to pretend. He hugged me, not a handshake. A real hug, the kind where you feel the weight of the other person leaning in. I held on to my son for a moment and thought about the kitchen table on Carlisle Street, and the homework, and the heating bills, and all the years of keeping the lights on and holding things together in the quiet, anonymous way that fathers do. When nobody is watching, I didn't know, he said into my shoulder. I know you didn't, I said. I should have. Tomorrow, I said. We'll talk tomorrow. Tonight you close your investors. He pulled back and looked at me with red eyes and managed a small laugh. Yeah, he said. Okay. I drove back to Dayton on the interstate with the heat on and the radio off. The night was clear and the highway was nearly empty, and I let myself feel, for the first time in a long time, something close to peace. Not the peace of having won something, the peace of having stopped hiding, of having let the thing I had spent 20 years protecting finally breathe a little air. 3 weeks later, Gerald called to tell me that Raymond Ferris and Clearwater Capital had formally committed to a seed round investment in Vantage Freight Solutions. Kevin called me the same afternoon, his voice so full of adrenaline he was talking faster than I had heard him talk since he was 12. They came in, Dad. They committed. I know, I said. Gerald told me. Raymond said something interesting, Kevin said. He said the reason they moved so quickly was not just the financials. He said there was something about the meeting that felt different. He said he could not explain it exactly, but that when he left Meridian Hall that night, he felt like the people behind Vantage were the real thing. Kevin paused. I think he was talking about you. I did not say anything for a moment. You did the work, Kevin, I said. You earned that room. Raymond Ferris is a smart man. He knows what real looks like. There was a quiet on the line that was not empty. It was the kind of quiet that holds something too large to say directly. I've been doing a lot of thinking, Kevin finally said, about the last couple of years, about how I've been acting, about what I've been prioritizing. He stopped. I'm not proud of some of it, Dad. I know, I said. I want to do better. I know that too. I rocked slowly in the chair on my front porch on Carlisle Street. The neighborhood was the same neighborhood it had always been. The Hendersons across the street still kept their Halloween decorations up a week too long. The Pattersons' dog still barked at every car. The maple tree in my front yard had gone full red and was beginning to let go. In a few weeks, I would be out there raking the same leaves I had been raking for 30 years. I had received a call from a reporter at the Columbus Business Journal 2 weeks prior, asking if I would comment on the rumors circulating in financial circles about the Whitfield Asset Trust and its connection to the Hargrove Medical Equity stake. I had declined. Gerald had issued a brief statement on the trust's behalf confirming the scholarship endowment and nothing more. The quiet had returned, and I was grateful for it. The scholarship applications for the Whitfield Educational Fund opened the following Monday. Gerald's office handled the administrative load, but I had asked to personally review a summary of each applicant's essay. 61 applications arrived in the first week. I read, Every single one. A girl from Trotwood whose mother worked 2 jobs and who wanted to study nursing. A boy from Belmont who had been his younger sibling's primary caregiver since age 14 and who wanted to become a civil engineer. A young woman who had written her essay by hand because her family's laptop had broken and she could not afford to repair it before the deadline. I set the applications down on the kitchen table and sat in the same chair I had sat in the night after the launch party, the same chair Kevin had done his homework in for 12 years, and I looked at the worn grain of the wood and I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. Not pride exactly, more like purpose. More like the specific satisfaction of a man who has spent decades quietly building something and can finally see clearly what it was all for. My son is building his company. He calls me every Sunday now, without fail. The conversations are longer than they used to be and easier. He is doing the thinking I asked him to do, and I can hear it in the way he asks questions, in the steadiness that is starting to return to his voice. I am still living on Carlisle Street. I still drive the Silverado. I had the kitchen table refinished last month, which is the most significant renovation I have made to this house in 5 years, and it looks exactly the same as it did before, which is precisely the point. A man is not what he owns. A man is not the size of the room he walks into. A man is what he builds in the dark, when no one is watching, when there is no applause, when the only reason to keep going is that the people who depend on you need you to keep going. That is the only inheritance worth leaving. Everything else is furniture. If this story meant something to you, if you have ever been underestimated by someone who could not see past the surface of who you are, please hit the like button and leave a comment below. Tell me where you are watching from. Tell me about the person in your life who is more than anyone expected them to be. Subscribe to this channel because there are more stories coming, and every single one of them is about what it means to stand up quietly, without flinching, and let the truth do the rest. I will see you in the next one.